So the more we brainwash ourselves into our existing beliefs, including, by the way, oh my God, everything is so hard. Stress is so overwhelming. I have ADHD. ADHD cripples me in all of these 1,000 different ways. I'm so traumatized. I'm so triggered. Life is hard. Life is hard. Life is hard. These are the beliefs that we have, which then get reinforced. As they get reinforced, cognitive flexibility goes down, BDNF goes down. And this is the result. Today, we're going to talk about how we're all being brainwashed. And you may wonder, brainwashed to believe what? Right? Because when we think about brainwashing, we think about maybe there's a government that is trying to use some kind of political propaganda to convince us of something, or there's a cult that is trying to isolate us from our family. But it turns out that we're all being brainwashed to believe what we already believe. We are essentially brainwashing ourselves with our own existing beliefs. And that may sound a little bit weird because you're saying, well, what's the problem in that? Isn't the harm from brainwash coming from people injecting particular beliefs into your head? And it turns out that no, that's not actually the main harm. It turns out that brainwashing in and of itself is very damaging psychologically. Now you may wonder, damaging psychologically in what way? We have a society where depression is on the rise, social anxiety is on the rise, we have a loneliness epidemic, people are more triggered and traumatized than ever before, we're all more stressed out. Which of these things correlate with brainwashing? And it turns out that the answer is yes. They all correlate with brainwashing. So I got curious about this when I watched this particular TikTok.
This is the most insane example of how everyone is experiencing completely different social medias at the exact same time. Like, this video, my boyfriend said he'd be over by 3 after golfing. And, like, it's just her every half an hour taking a video saying, oh, he's still not here. And it gets to, like, 5 or 6 p.m. and he's still not here, okay? I opened the comments of this video and, kind of as I expected, everyone was saying, oh, that's really rude. It's the disregard of her time. I don't like him. Did he communicate with you? If not, then that's a red flag. Okay, fair enough. You know, I send this video to my boyfriend who was sat next to me. And then I said to my boyfriend, lol, look at the comments. Bear in mind, these comments were coming up at the top of the list. So as soon as you open the comments, these are the ones that came up for me. Tell me fucking why my boyfriend opens the comments on his phone. Again, it's the first list of comments that come up. It's the same time on the same video, or you could get your own hobby instead of waiting around for him. Like, God forbid he has a good time. He meant before 3 a.m. He's ahead of schedule. No fucking wonder we're all so divided.
Hey y'all, if you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. It combines over 2 decades of my experience of both being a monk and a psychiatrist, and distills all of the most important things I've learned into a choose-your-own-adventure format. So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today. So I saw this video and wondered, what is the mental health impact of essentially being exposed to our beliefs over and over and over again? Because that's what the internet is doing. We have these algorithms that figure out what you like. And it used to be that they would just serve you up videos of things that you already like, things that you agree with. We all know that there are echo chambers on the internet. But now things have moved to the next step, which is that we're now being fed algorithmic comments. So not only are we seeing a particular video that we agree with, but we're seeing a lot of other people also agree with that video. And what this is essentially doing is creating an echo chamber for our mind. And then the question kind of becomes, what is the mental health impact of creating an echo chamber of our own mind? Because this is essentially a form of brainwashing, right? So when we think about brainwashing, it is continual exposure to the same ideas over and over and over again until you get programmed. And we think about the problem with brainwashing being that, okay, some nefarious organization like a government or a cult is going to inject a particular set of beliefs into our mind. And so we think that the damage from brainwashing comes from this nefarious thing that is being implanted in our mind. But if we look at the science of it, it's actually way scarier than that. Brainwashing ourselves with our own beliefs is very psychologically damaging. And you may wonder, in what way is it psychologically damaging? Because in the world today, we're seeing rises in depression, we're seeing rises in anxiety, social anxiety, loneliness epidemic, people are having problems dating, people are less empathic, people are more stressed, people are more traumatized. So which of these correlates with brainwashing? All of them correlate with brainwashing. And this is what's super scary. So I want y'all to understand this. In order for our mind to be healthy, It requires a variety of inputs, okay? So if you just think about like your gut, right? What is my diet? What does my body need to be healthy? I can't just eat one thing over and over and over again. If I just eat one thing over and over and over again, I will get sick. And the same is true of our mind. It turns out that exposing our mind to a variety of stimuli is very important for mental health. But right now, what's going on in the internet is the exact opposite. We are just being fed the same stuff over and over and over again. So let's take a look at a couple of the papers that really explore this. So this is a paper from The Partisan Mind. Is extreme political partisanship related to cognitive inflexibility? And this paper is looking at a sample of over 700 U.S. citizens, and partisan extremity was related to lower levels of cognitive flexibility regardless of political orientation. So this is not very surprising, right? We're basically saying people who are extremely political radicalized are not very cognitively inflexible. Really simple, right? We also know that there are echo chambers on the internet that sort of reinforce a set of political beliefs. So not a big deal, but we still need to establish scientifically what we sort of intuitively know, which is that cognitive inflexibility is important for radical beliefs. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The role of BDNF and NPY levels, effects of behavioral systems and emotion regulation on internet addiction in adolescents. So before we go further, we need to kind of take a step back and understand what's going on in the brain. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Brain-derived means that it's made by the brain. Neuro is referring to the brain, and trophic means growth. So this is a chemical that is released by the brain that stimulates growth of neurons and brain cells. BDNF is incredibly important in parts of the brain like the hippocampus, which governs things like learning and memory. So if we sort of think a little bit about what is learning, learning is essentially being cognitively flexible, right? So I think 11 times 11 is 111. And in order to recognize my mistake, I have an existing belief, and I have to be flexible from that belief and start to look at other things. I have to realize, hey, I could be wrong. So if we look at the process of learning, it requires essentially abandoning old incorrect beliefs for newer, more correct beliefs. And so as we get brainwashed by the internet, we stop doing that. So now what I'm going to start to do is walk y'all through a chain of research that sort of connects how getting exposed to very few things will sort of impact our cognitive flexibility, impact our BDNF levels, and what are the health outcomes that are caused by this. The Partisan Mind is extreme political partisanship related to cognitive inflexibility. So this is a paper that's basically looking at, if we look at people who are politically radicalized, are they cognitively flexible or cognitively inflexible? And if you've got, an ounce of common sense in your head, you're going to realize that in a sample of over 700 U.S. citizens, partisan extremity was related to lower levels of cognitive flexibility, regardless of political orientation, across 3 independent cognitive assessments of flexibility. Now, this basically says the more radicalized you are, the less cognitively flexible you are. But I still have to share this because we don't want to make any assumptions here, right? We want to really sort of connect all of these dots in a very, very valid way. Okay, so we kind of know this, but let's move on. Effects of duloxetine treatment on cognitive flexibility and BDNF expression in adult male mice exposed to social stress. So this is a paper that's looking at a mouse model, right? So these are not humans, but most of these studies are on humans. But we're just going to sort of show the basic science here. That when I have BDNF, when BDNF goes up, my cognitive flexibility goes up. And the cool thing is when BDNF and cognitive flexibility are high, adult male mice exposed to social stress are able to cope with that stress better. So in order to cope with our stress, we need the ability to be cognitively flexible. Here's another study that sort of shows relatively similar things. So this is a study that's looking at mice once again, but we're looking at stroke. So when a mouse has a stroke, the brain tries to heal the damage. And if the mouse secretes a lot of BDNF, after a stroke, the BDNF levels rise, then we see an improvement in cognitive flexibility. So this is another study basically showing us that BDNF and cognitive flexibility are very connected, even in mice, even in humans. Now let's get to more clinical stuff. So what difference does this make for our mental health, right? Let's take a look. The role of BDNF and neuropeptide Y levels on internet addiction in adolescence. Now, this is really interesting. Now we're saying, okay, what role does BDNF have in actually getting addicted to the internet? Now, this is fascinating. This is in humans, okay? This is humans. These are adolescents. I don't know if there are any mouse models of internet addiction. BDNF and neuropeptide Y levels were found to be lower in adolescents with internet addiction compared to healthy controls. So we got to pause here for a second and understand this, okay? So when our brain has lower BDNF and we become cognitively inflexible, we are more likely to become addicted to the internet. Okay, this is actually a correlational study, I think, so it could be either way around, and that's really important. What this also means is that since this is a cross-sectional study, what this means is that people who are addicted to the internet may have lower BDNF levels. We just know that those two things are tied. But a lot of people may assume that if I have low BDNF levels, I'm more likely to be addicted to the internet. But the opposite could also be true. The more addicted to the internet I am, the more it could reduce my BDNF levels. Okay, so this is really important to understand. So if we are using the internet a lot, there's a good chance that our BDNF levels will start to drop. And how do we know this? It's also because we know that stimulation from the environment in new ways, challenges to your ways of thinking, exposing yourself to new ideas, improves cognitive flexibility and likely improves BDNF as well. Traumatic life events in relation to cognitive flexibility. The moderating role of BDNF gene variation polymorphism. Okay, so now I know this is weird. I'll explain it, okay? When we get traumatized in life, our capacity for cognitive flexibility protects us from the trauma or basically screws us up. So if you look at there's a saying that what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. But that's not scientifically true. What doesn't kill you can make you stronger or cripples you for life. And it turns out that one of the key differences between whether you grow from trauma or get screwed by trauma is BDNF expression. So this is a study that's kind of looking at a particular variant of a gene that makes BDNF that is protective or harmful. So we're kind of like, we don't need to get into the details of the Val66 Met gene. The main thing to kind of reinforce here is even the background of this paper, which is we know that responding to traumatic life events is better when we have high levels of BDNF and a higher level of cognitive flexibility. So correlation of internet addiction disorder with level of stress in BDNF gene, polymorphism among medical students in Malaysia. This is a study that I think is a little bit more theoretical, but it's just sort of, once again, pointing out the connection between internet addiction, level of stress, and BDNF gene expression. Now let's get to a couple of other things. So measuring cognitive flexibility with the flexible item selection task from MRI adaptation to individual connectome mapping. We don't need to get into the details of this paper. What we're going to kind of focus on here is that this paper sort of tells us that greater cognitive flexibility is associated with resilience to negative life events and stress and higher levels of creativity, okay? So now what we're doing is we're sort of really understanding, okay, how much does cognitive inflexibility cost us? So we will be less resilient, we will be more stressed, and we will be less creative if we are cognitively inflexible. This is my favorite study, which if you guys have been watching the channel, you've seen me cite over and over and over again. Even rank in League of Legends correlates with one thing, which is cognitive flexibility, okay? So we're going to be less resilient, we're going to be more traumatized, and we're going to suck at games if we are cognitively inflexible. Let's go dive into hard neuroscience, baby. Adult hippocampal neurogenesis and cognitive flexibility. In this review, we primarily discuss data from rodent studies that have investigated how adult-born neurons contribute to information encoding in the dentate gyrus, blah, 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 blah. We discuss how this regulation of the dentate gyrus function by adult neurogenesis affects cognitive processes of reversal learning and cognitive flexibility. Now, I realize I'm spamming y'all with lots of stuff. What on earth is Dr. K saying? So this is a neuroscience review that is basically supporting the argument that I am making. What this paper is basically saying is that the process of learning involves this reversal process. So what that sort of means is that I believe thing A, and if I want to be cognitively flexible, and if I literally want new neurons to be born in my hippocampus, I need to engage in a process of something called reversal learning, which means I believe this, but since I'm cognitively flexible, I don't have to see things that way. I can actually look at things a different way and make a new learning on the neuronal level in this part of our brain. This is what this study is looking at. So when we brainwash ourselves, what we are literally doing is getting rid of that process, right? I'm not learning something new. I'm getting reinforced with my existing beliefs over and over and over again. This results in reductions of cognitive flexibility and reductions in BDNF. So now we're going to get to the impacts of this. What does this cost us if we brainwash ourselves and we're no longer cognitively flexible? So it turns out that we stop learning from our mistakes. So let's take a look at how cognitive flexibility affects this other thing called reward prediction error processing, okay? Basically what happens is if you look at your life, you make predictions, okay? And then if your prediction is wrong, you have to adjust your future predictions. So I say to myself, oh, I don't need to start studying today. I will start studying tomorrow and it'll be okay. And then you start studying, and then tomorrow rolls around and you don't study tomorrow, and then tomorrow rolls around, and then eventually you start studying. When you start studying, you panic and you're filled with regret. And you're like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I should have started a long time ago. And then some of us are confused because despite the fact that we said we would start earlier next time, we do not learn from our mistakes. And we're very frustrated with ourselves. It's like, you know this, right? You know you should start earlier. Why the fuck don't you start earlier? And it turns out that there is a part of your brain which, when it makes a prediction, recognizes an error and then adjusts future predictions. Hey, it's stupid to wait till the last minute. Let me stop waiting till the last minute. But when this part of the brain is impaired, you do not learn from your mistakes. This also correlates with cognitive flexibility and BDNF, which I know that now we're really stringing things together. I don't know if this is scientifically valid. We're going to get to this at the end. What this means is the more we brainwash ourselves, the more cognitively inflexible we become, the less BDNF we have floating around, and we literally stop learning from our mistakes. And then we do the same damn shit over and over and over again. The role of stress mindset in shaping cognitive, emotional, and physiological responses to challenging and threatening stress. So, results reveal that under both threat and challenge stress evaluations, a stress is enhancing mindset. Stress is a good thing. I can learn. I can grow. Produce sharper increases in anabolic growth hormones relative to a stress's debilitating mindset. Oh my God, stress is crushing me. I'm way too stressed out. I'm overwhelmed. I can't do anything. Furthermore, when stress was evaluated as a challenge, stress's enhancing mindset produced sharper increases in positive affect, heightened attentional bias towards a positive stimuli, and greater cognitive flexibility. Whereas stress's debilitating produced worse cognitive and affective outcomes. So I want y'all to understand this, okay? There's two kinds of people in life. There's people who are like, this is a challenge. Let me work extra hard. Let me grow. I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna put forth all my effort. I'm gonna be resilient. Like, you know, these fucking people who are like, the stress is a good thing. Like, it gets the best out of me. And then there's the rest of us. Stress is overwhelming. Make it go away. The same stimulus results in a Chad behavior or a beta behavior. And what is the difference? It is cognitive flexibility. Being able to adopt this mindset requires you to be cognitively flexible. So the more we brainwash ourselves into our existing beliefs, including, by the way, oh my God, everything is so hard. Stress is so overwhelming. I have ADHD. ADHD cripples me in all of these 1,000 different ways. I'm so traumatized. I'm so triggered. Life is hard. Life is hard. Life is hard. This is what we ingest from the internet. These are the beliefs that we have, which then get reinforced. As they get reinforced, cognitive flexibility goes down, BDNF goes down. And this is the result. So psychological flexibility and mindfulness is predictors of individual outcomes in hospital workers. Employees who show psychological flexibility are more likely to show greater openness to acceptance of setbacks in the working environment and to carry on their valued living and working path. Holy crap. If you're a doomer, and if you're like, oh my God, this is a failure, I'll be alone for the rest of my life, I'm never going to find a job, everything is sucked, you are not able to accept setbacks, right? And let's think about this. What is a setback? Some people view it as a failure. Some people view it as a setback. That goes back to mindset. And people who are more cognitively flexible are able to carry on towards their goals. I lose hope. I get traumatized. I have social stress. I don't learn from my mistakes. I keep doing the same crap over and over and over again. I cannot follow through. I can't commit to a career path. Every setback feels like a failure. Like all of these things that we see so much today all correlate with cognitive flexibility or the lack of cognitive flexibility. So cognitive flexibility and emotion regulation and acceptance and commitment therapy. So what about regulating my emotions? I feel really angry. How do I stop feeling angry? I feel really ashamed. I don't want to go to the gym. I feel ashamed. I feel anxious in a social situation. Turns out that the reported relationship between self-report measures of cognitive flexibility and psychological flexibility suggest cognitive flexibility as an additional treatment target to augment ACT, supporting successful development of psychological flexibility and emotion regulation. What does it mean to regulate your emotion? I feel one way. Emotional regulation means learning to feel another way. De-tilting, right? I'm so tilted. Learning how to untilt requires a flexibility of the mind. So emotional regulation is correlated with cognitive flexibility too. Intelligence is cognitive flexibility. We're not going to go into more because I've looked at like 1,000 research articles and we've got a couple of good ones left. TLDR makes you dumber, and we're all getting dumber, like brain rot. What? Impact of anxiety on the prefrontal cortex encoding of cognitive flexibility. It affects anxiety. The influence of cognitive flexibility on treatment outcome and cognitive restructuring skill acquisition during cognitive behavioral treatment for anxiety and depression in older results. This is crazy. What this means is everyone's like, go to therapy, bruh. Are you depressed? Are you anxious? Go to therapy. And a lot of people in our community say therapy doesn't work. It turns out that the effect of therapy, your ability to utilize therapy, depends on cognitive flexibility. If you take a bunch of people who are cognitively inflexible and you send them to therapy, their treatment outcomes are worse. They cannot learn to think a different way. Therapy doesn't work. This paper is crazy, okay? I'm going to kind of gloss over this, but this is a paper essentially about addiction, stimulant use disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder that is looking at basically like this principle of cognitive flexibility and reinforcement learning. Like if we look at people who are addicted, okay? So I'll just explain this one, and then let's look at this. Yeah, let's look at this one, then we'll talk about the addiction one, okay? So cognitive flexibility predicts PTSD symptoms. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, whether you develop, you can predict whether someone is going to develop PTSD symptoms based on how cognitively flexible or inflexible they are. So this addiction paper is a little bit different. It's really not connected and doesn't support my hypothesis very well, but we'll sort of explain the principle anyway. So this is a paper that's looking at obsessive behavior in stimulant use, like being an addict, right? That means you have obsessive behavior. And then the other way that we have obsessive behavior is an OCD. And it's actually looking at the dopamine circuit, and it's sort of examining how if we alter the dopamine circuit, we change our obsessive behavior. And if we look at what is obsessive behavior, it is not being able to be flexible. I'm thinking about this and then I can't stop thinking about this. I have a craving. I can't make the craving go away. I can't start thinking about something else. And that correlates with cognitive flexibility as well. So I want y'all to kind of think about this. I know I've spit a ton of research at y'all, and hopefully it kind of makes sense, but I'm going to make it TLDR for y'all. Okay. And then y'all got to let me know like whether this is too much. So what's going on in the world right now is that mental illness is on the rise, and not just mental illness, mental debilitation. We lack empathy. We can't form relationships. We're socially anxious. We don't learn from our mistakes. We're getting addicted to the internet. We can't adopt this growth mindset. We feel overwhelmed. We feel stressed. We get addicted to stimulants. We get addicted to pornography. We get addicted to video games. We can't follow through with our work. There's an increase in burnout. Like, what the fuck, right? This is all going on. And the question is why? So if we look at the system, we can't be doing this unless something major is screwed up. And I want y'all to think about this, okay? So imagine a scenario where all human beings on the planet stopped moving. We stopped exercising at all. We all became obese. We all became sedentary. What would we see? We'd see failures across all organ systems. We'd see heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, endocrine problems, brain problems. Every dimension of our life would start to get negatively impacted once we remove a basic human function. Human bodies need to move. So what are we seeing in the world today? We are seeing an overwhelming amount of problems in the mind: stress, anxiety, trauma, depression. lack of follow through, burnout, social isolation, social anxiety. What is going on? The only explanation is that something very fundamental has to be going on. We have to be depriving our minds of something critical that leads to all kinds of downstream problems. Same thing that you would see if we started all randomly eating the same food every day, right? So there's this a movie called Interstellar, I think, where like all things on the planet except for corn disappear. And so now everyone's eating corn, and then you get all kinds of like nutrient deficiencies. Our eyes would stop working. Our guts would be messed up. Every part of our body would be messed up if we're only eating one thing. We need a varied diet to be healthy. This is what we're doing to our mind. This is my hypothesis. That what the internet is doing is incredibly damaging by brainwashing ourselves to believe what we already believe. And as we don't get a varied mental diet, all of this stuff is implicated in going wrong. And the reason I believe this stuff is because I looked at these papers. I only showed y'all like 12, right? Normally I'll show 2 or 3. The reason that I showed y'all 12, I know it's a little bit boring and a little bit overwhelming, is because this explains so much. As we consume the same content, BDNF levels drop, cognitive flexibility drops, and look at all the problems that are associated with it. And this really scary thing is that in the past, before human beings as a society started whole-scale injecting ourselves with crap, we study it, right? So before, we would do tests on fluoride before we started adding it to the drinking water. There are cases in human history where we don't do that, like cigarettes. Cigarettes showed up and no one looked at what was going on, or maybe some people did, or they hid it, right? But there was some amount of studies going on that we understood what this is doing to our body in some way. We scientifically studied stuff before we started injecting it into our bodies. Now what's going on is you have platforms that are developing these algorithms that are implementing them. It is injecting crap into our brain, and no one even knows. We haven't even started to study this stuff. We have studies that are being published on Facebook today, right? Like on Facebook as an intervention, Facebook usage has dropped. So these technological advancements are happening so rapidly. Suddenly the comment sections are changing, and every person who uses TikTok is injecting this change into their brain. And we wonder why there's a mental health crisis. This is why there's a mental health crisis. I'm not blaming TikTok specifically. What I'm blaming is a system that is creating innovations and injecting it into our brain without an understanding of what impact this is happening. So what does this mean for y'all? What do you do about it? Like, I don't know, man. It's so overwhelming, right? Like, this is crazy. So the first thing is I could say get off the internet, but that doesn't work, right? I mean, here we are. But now hopefully you understand the importance of getting off the internet, the importance of avoiding things like TikTok in the comment section, maybe even YouTube Shorts or Twitch or whatever. Just be super careful about your internet use. The most important thing is engage in contrary opinions. This is what we try to do here, right? We don't try to judge ahead of time. Someone is allowed to come on and they're allowed to share their perspective. We're here to listen and we're here to learn. And what we see in our community is that people get better. Is it because Dr. K has some magical advice? I don't think so. I think it's because what we try to do here is encourage people to think in different ways, which in and of itself is such an adaptive advantage. So be super careful about circle jerking yourself into an echo chamber. Like, even though it feels really good, and that's why the platforms do it, by the way, because it keeps you hooked. That's why you go back, oh man, like all women are bitches. Like, oh yeah, all men suck. Man versus bear, right? And then I saw the male equivalent of, would you rather share your feelings with a woman or a tree? And then we all like circle jerk ourselves into some kind of like dangerous frenzy of hatred towards some other group. The in-group and the out-group. But what we're seeing is a decay across society, a lack of understanding, and terrible mental health outcomes. So spend less time on the internet. That's a great idea. Main thing is, even if you're going to spend time on the internet, whatever you spend time on, watch the opposite side. Try to understand the opposite side. Try to increase your cognitive flexibility. And then there's a decent chance that all of these dimensions in your life will improve, right? Because cognitive flexibility is intelligence. So I know it's kind of a doomsday scenario, but it really terrifies me. And when I saw this video, I was like, what is going on here? Like, this is insane. And the more I looked into it, the more insane it got. Like, this is crazy. All of the problems are correlated with changes in the comment section. Good luck, because you're going to need it.